Okay, so I got kicked out of the jewelry room, so I've got all this stuff set up on my lap. If I move in the slightest bit, my mouse will fall, and then everything will be screwed up. So what I have for you today is a condensed and partial book review on Science of the Sacraments by Charles Webster Leadbeater. Uh, so I'll give you a couple of facts. Uh, Science of the Sacraments was published in 1920 by Charles Webster Leadbeater, a theosophist from Australia and one of the founding bishops of the Liberal Catholic Church. I've already talked a bit about the Liberal Catholic Church in previous videos that I've made, but I will just say that they are entirely separate from the Roman Catholic Church and much more mystical in nature. Uh, Science of the Sacraments is pretty much required reading in most all independent Catholic and independent sacramental seminaries. Um, Main focus of the book is the Holy Eucharist, which takes up nearly half, I would say nearly half of the book. Um, it covers the other sacraments as well, but I'm not really going to be talking about any of these. If you don't know what the Eucharist is, it's just another word for the Catholic Mass or the Holy Communion. The Lord's Supper is it's also been referred to as. Um, According to Leadbeater, at each stage of the Mass, a spiritual edifice is gradually built up. This edifice is a spiritual structure erected over the church building and is made of matter from the astral, mental, and etheric planes. The purpose of the edifice is to store and focus divine energy so that it can be distributed to the participants and to the people on the surrounding community later on. He believed that whether priests were aware of it or not, whether they be Catholic, Orthodox, or other, um, this process happened every time the Mass was said. Uh, kind of kind of in the same way where you get in your car and you start up your car, you still drive your car without knowing exactly what the engine is doing. You can know nothing about the engine and still use the car. So it's the same way with a priest performing the Mass. I mean, obviously, priests in the Roman Catholic Church are not going to be trained in these theosophical ideas of astral planes and things like that. He was said to be a clairvoyant and had the ability not only to see this edifice, but he could detect flaws in its construction if the Mass was not done properly. He, along with others, fine-tuned and simplified the older form of the Mass and removed the guilt-laced and self-debasing language to form two new versions of the Eucharist, the Liberal Catholic Rite and the Liberal Catholic Rite shorter form. This new version of the Mass is the gold standard of most independent Catholic churches today. Even some Gnostic churches use altered forms of it. Not only could Leadbeater see the edifice as it was being constructed, but also saw the angelic helpers who were responsible for building the edifice. If the Mass was done sloppily, the angels would have to use more energy to build the edifice, leaving less energy for the distribution of these spiritual forces. According to him, along with these angelic helpers, there were also nature spirits or elementals in attendance, and he could see the flow of energies. The devotion of thoughts of the congregations were seen by him as vivid colors such as rose and blue. At other sacraments, such as baptism, he would see a silvery white light descending on the candidate. Now, these are pretty wild claims, and if you had a friend who confided in you that they had been seeing colors surrounding their conversations or If they saw thought forms being constructed outside of churches, what would you think? You might suspect that they had taken some illicit substance, or my mouse is going to fall. If my mouse falls on the floor, all heck is going to break loose. Okay, where was I? So you might suggest that your friend would promptly make an appointment with a psychiatrist. So was Leadbeater crazy? So I want to read for you something that I've Google searched. Synesthesia, a neurological condition where stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to an automatic involuntary experience in a secondary or cognitive pathway. In other words, it's a fusion or joining of the senses. That's what synesthesia, etymology of the word. It's a joining of the senses. Now, for example, hearing colors or seeing sounds, things like that. So also, another thing I Googled was, with synesthesia, can feelings or emotions be fused with visual experiences? Yes, in synesthesia, emotions or feelings can be fused with visual experiences, a phenomenon where internal emotional states involuntarily trigger perceptions of color, shapes, or textures. While this is less common than sound to color, this emotion color synesthesia means individuals might experience specific emotions. For instance, orange sparks joy, or vice versa. So, I suspect that Leadbeater may have had synesthesia. I think he was an empath, also, who sensed the emotions of others, and these emotions would then be fused with the visual cortex and projected outward. Also, musicians, a lot of musicians have this, and it improves memory and probably makes for better music. So, just because he had this thing with his brain doesn't make what he did and the liturgy that he helped to write any less important. Also, he was certainly not the first person to have ever experienced angels or nature spirits, such as I don't know, dwarfs or gnomes and things like that. I actually met someone who claims to have seen a gnome. So he was not the first person to ever see this edifice either. And I'm going to read for you a clip from an article in gnosis.org by Bishop Stefan Heller, the Ecclesia Gnostica. It's an article called Gnosis of the Eucharist, and if you want to, I would highly suggest reading the whole article. It's a very good little article. C.W. Leadbeater, the Theosophist and liberal Catholic bishop, in his work, The Science of the Sacraments, made some fascinating observations on the magic of the Mass. With his paranormal faculties, Leadbeater perceived certain recurring patterns of force not ordinarily visible that manifested at each celebration of the Eucharist. This pattern seemed to organize itself into a form that described a sort of structure resembling a spire or cupola. Personal experience of the writer, talking about himself, may be of interest in this connection. About 1948 or 49, the writer acted as a part-time assistant to a Roman Catholic prelate in Australia, Abbot Al- Alois Weisinger, who was writing a book on occult phenomenon. While perusing the abbot's files, he discovered a drawing prepared some years before by a rural seer, representing a form clairvoyantly perceived by the seer every time the mass was said in the village church. Some 6 or 7 years later, the writer discovered a representation of the Eucharistic edifice in Leadbeater's book. It matched the Australian one in eerie detail. Moreover, the chances of an illiterate alpine peasant ever having encountered Leadbeater's book are very small. That two persons of such different characters should have perceived the same structure of magical forces in the Eucharist is evidence that cannot be easily dismissed. Oops, I just dropped my phone. I don't need it anymore, anyways. So I don't think he was crazy. His brain may have worked a little differently than most, but he was not crazy. Am I being a reductionist by saying this was just brain activity? Maybe, but I don't think so. Our brains have evolved to filter out certain things for our survival. First of all, imagine being somebody who can see all these things and trying to get through a work day or something. It would be quite distracting. Also, imagine trying to be still, hiding from a lion, while seeing its hunger manifesting as a brilliant display of red and orange. You'd probably get eaten. These energies and thought forms that he perceived no doubt exist, but not every brain is capable of perceiving them. Before I conclude, I just wanted to point out something I dislike about the ideas put forth in the book. It emphasizes that clergy and congregation working together to form this edifice, and that the more devout and spiritually developed the congregation, the more effective the service. To me, this seems like a spiritual elitism. If there are people in the surrounding community who require the blessings generated by the church service, shouldn't they be the ones attending the service? It seems like a sort of spiritual socialism to have these energies stored up by a spiritual elite and then to be distributed to the less fortunate. This usually doesn't work out so well in the physical world. Think taxes. Give your taxes to the government, and they probably waste 90% of them. So it just, there's nothing wrong with what he's saying. I just think it's a little elitist. Praying for others in your community is definitely part of the Mass, but I think the ultimate goal, and I've said this before in one of my other videos, that the ultimate goal of any ritual is the symbolic restoration of the original state of things before the fall of man. Whatever you want to believe the fall of man might entail, eating an apple or whatever the case. So what can we learn from this book? Ignoring the whimsical and fantastic descriptions of the thought forms and colors, you are still left with a very practical guide to the workings of each of the sacraments, as well as the theology behind them. But I suggest taking the whimsical side of the book seriously. Excuse me. Whether you are clergy celebrating Mass or just attending, in whatever Mass that might be, Catholic, Episcopal, or Orthodox. If you keep in the back of your mind all the things that Leadbeater saw and felt at the various stages of the Mass, and pay attention, you may not see what he saw, but you might experience a little more than you normally would. I have a small example, a short example here that I wanted to read for you from the book. Just before the reading of the gospel, it's called the Munda Cormeum. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Um, the celebrant would say, "May the Lord be in my heart and on my lips, that through my heart the love of God may shine forth, and through my lips His power be made manifest. Amen." This prayer said, as above, at low celebrations only. At high celebrations, the first part is repeated by the deacon. I didn't read the first part. Who then kneels before the celebrant, or before the bishop, if present. The latter. Oh, I was supposed to read the. I wanted to read the end of page 119. With the words, sorry about that. With the words, "May the Lord be in thy heart," a beautiful golden stream is poured out, which largely affects the deacon's heart. And when the celebrant says, "And on thy lips," or on my lips if there's no deacon present, the gleaming silver flashes out, which is chiefly attracted to his throat center, at the words, "That through thy heart the love of God may shine forth." The deacon is surrounded by a beautiful cloud of rose color with a glowing nucleus at the chakra in his breast. The clause, "And through thy lips His power be made manifest," sends a stream of the wonderful pale blue power of the first ray, which is always sparkling with flashing silver, into the deacon at the throat. By means of the minor benediction, he immediately shares this blessing with the people and receives their response, thus completing the link with them. The effect on the congregation of this close harmony is largely in stimulating its members mentally. The awakening of their centers is only a secondary consideration, useful inasmuch as it helps in the quickening of the faculty of receiving and understanding. Therefore, in all this preparation for the gospel, the deacon should have in mind the general enlivening of the power of comprehending and assimilating, rather than be concentrating too much on the people's centers. To make this point clear, it will be well to see how the outpourings of color affect the deacon. The heart center has to do especially with the expression of the nobler emotions, and there is a direct connection between the upper astral and the buddhic or intuitional levels. Now, the golden power which is first poured onto the deacon's heart is buddhic, and thus stimulates the intuitional side of the higher powers of understanding. The pink of affection, which is later concentrated in the deacon's heart, ensures that the gospel shall be interpreted in the spirit of pure love. The astral sensation, which is most akin to anything Buddhic, which on the higher planes is not only love, but wisdom, the right understanding of things. The throat being the center through which we have a direct touch with the higher astral levels, where we find the loftiest and most Buddhic form of love, is for this reason also vivified, but is not only for the sake of that higher touch that this chakra is quickened, but also because we are about to hear a reading, to listen, and the throat is the physical receiver for astral sound. But in the case of the deacon, there is yet another reason for this. The silvery electric blue of the first ray powers are given to him in order that, as the words passing his lips, the lips are an extension of the throat chakra, they may receive the most powerful possible impetus. So you can also see how the colors and emotions are intertwined here. But so if you keep these ideas in the back of your mind, in less detail, obviously that's very detailed, you will at some level be thinking, okay, the heart and throat chakras are now being activated. And you might, just knowing that in the back of your mind, you might begin to perceive it. You might not feel anything at all at first, or you may notice a warmth in those centers, in those chakras. One could argue that this is the placebo effect happening. But if a doctor prescribes you a placebo and it cures you, uh, that just tells us how powerful the mind actually is. So, in the end, the effect is the same, whether it's a placebo or not. Um, so, in conclusion, if we take these things seriously and go into it with an open mind, at the very least, we will become more still, more aware, more present in the moment at Mass. And if we are present and attentive and conscious to what is going on, I can assure you that we will perceive more than we would if we participated in an unconscious way. And that's it. And I wanted to show you a picture of the edifice. I have one in one of my books. It's right on the cover. Anyway, I'll use a cover picture for my video, so you'll see it before you even click play. So thank you for watching, and enjoy your weekend.